Welcome to the third part of this deep dive analysis looking at the Hunger Games through the lens of the hero's journey. Before we get started, if you want to get an email with a time-stamped overview every time I release a new video, then head over to my website, which is at deliberate-practice.com. Sign up for my email list. There's other content at the website, and I'll be adding thank you goodies and email subscriber only goodies in the upcoming weeks and months. So do go and do that, and let's jump in. Now, we've reached the 8th step of the hero's journey, which is the supreme ordeal. And if you remember the film, you might be thinking, well, it's quite unusual because the supreme ordeal is normally more towards the end of the film, and this is about halfway. But in the Hunger Games, the writers play with the hero's journey format. In the next video, when we look at the final 4 stages rather, of the hero's journey, we'll see there's a reordering of them, and there's one step that comes earlier than it should. So they're constantly playing with that. And remember Chris Vogler's words. He says the hero's journey is a set of guidelines, not a blueprint. So you don't have to go from ordinary world to call to adventure, to refusal of the call, to meeting with the mentor. You can omit steps, you can imply steps, you can juggle steps up. So it is a flexible story format and story model. Now, as I mentioned, normally it's a big moment, the supreme ordeal, with a relatively short scene that has lots of impact. But in the Hunger Games, it's 8 distinct sequences that form Katniss's trials and tribulations in the arena, which act as the supreme ordeal. Now, from a writing perspective, if you were writing something like this, you could actually consider and look at the 8 sequences as almost like a mini story or a mini movie on its own. So we're going to go through the sequences one by one, and there's one scene that I really will stop for a beat and draw attention to, because it's a really important scene in the whole arc of the overall story, not just this first story. So the first sequence is the initial survival. So Katniss runs from the cornucopia, and notice we talked about resonance, David Farland's book, drawing on the power of resonance in writing. If you go and Google cornucopia and find out what the technical definition of it is, again, you'll find some resonance there. But she runs away. She avoids the blood bath. She manages to grab one backpack, and it's got rope in it, amongst other things. And their Clove throws knives at her, tries to kill her. That will be echoed later on in the supreme ordeal sequences. But she gets away, and she goes looking for food. A butterfly leads her to water, and she takes shelter in a tree. So she's kind of survived the supreme ordeal, the initial survival and the coming down off the daises into the cornucopia. But in this sequence, we also get some expedition. There's the dead tributes, and their names get, and pictures of them get holographically displayed onto the what we'll learn in Catching Fire is a big dome onto the surface or ceiling of the dome. Also, there's a sequence where she sees a fire, and then shortly afterwards, the person who's lit the fire is disturbed by the career tributes, and we hear her scream, and then there's a cannon boom, and she's died. But Katniss has been betrayed, because with the career tributes is Peter. And again, there's a dynamic that goes all the way through this first film, a tension between Katniss and Peter. Is Peter being true? Is Katniss play acting? And the filmmakers do a great job of always making us question, are they doing something for the cameras? Is it their genuine feelings? So Peter's with them, and she feels a little betrayed by this. Second sequence is the fire sequence. Now, Katniss is at the perimeter of the arena, and we see the Games Masters look at her, and the head games master says, let's send her back. And they create some fireballs, light some fire to force her back, force her away. She gets burned quite badly on her legs, and she's running away from the fire, and she escapes to water, and she's in the water, and then she hears voices, and it's the career tributes, and they chase her, and she manages to climb up into a tree and rope herself to the tree, and Kato tries to climb up, but he's not skilled enough with a tree, and Glimmer fires some arrows, but she's not good enough shot, but she's got the bow and the arrow, and we saw her in earlier shots of the career tributes walking around the arena with the bow and the arrow, and Peter suggests that they just camp around the tree and starve her out because she'll have to come down at some stage. So she's sheltering in a tree, and then we get cut away and we see Haymitch organising sponsors to send some medicine, which is flown in, and Katniss rubs it on her leg, and her leg starts to heal. That brings us to the next sequence, which is the Tracker-Jacker attack. So Katniss wakes up, and her leg is healed, it's much better, and Rue, I think she whistles to her, and she's in an adjacent tree. And we don't think twice about this because it's been established that Rue can climb up into areas with the scene in the testing sequence where she's stolen Cato's knife and she's got it and she's in the ceiling. And again, she's kind of playing the trickster archetype here because she points to something and it's a Tracker-Jacker nest, and she makes a soaring motion with her hand, and Katniss gets it. And then there's a really cool piece of exposition here where we cut away to Caesar commenting, because remember, The Hunger Games is a reality TV show, and he comments for the audience and says, and his co-commentator and him are wincing at the thought of Tracker-Jackers, and he says their venom causes pain, it can cause hallucinations, and in extreme cases it can cause death. So we get this exposition that we need, so we when Katniss starts making the soaring of the branch that the Tracker-Jacker nest is hanging off, we understand that she's in a potential bit of peril. But the way it's handled is like it's what Gary Provost would call just-in-time exposition, and it's handled in a way that's dramatic. It's Caesar reminding the audience about Tracker-Jackers, as in the TV audience, especially the Capital viewers, and we get the information at the same time, and so it's done in quite a dramatic way. It's a really clever scene. I advise going and finding that on YouTube and watching it and seeing how it's done, and watching the scene actually, because it's a great scene. Anyway, she soars through the branch, she gets stung a few times, the nest drops on the career tributes, and the Tracker-Jackers kind of are especially attracted to or are stinging Glimmer the most, and she eventually is stung so much that she does die, and that's the Tracker attack sequence. Next sequence is hallucinations and Rue. Katniss comes down from the tree because she kind of falls down the last 15 feet or so, and she's hallucinating badly, and we see various things in there, and this sequence is filmed in quite a trippy way, with really interesting character angles and effects on the character. We see things of Peter telling her to run. We don't know if it's really the Peter, as in it's Peter in reality, or whether it's Peter in her hallucinations. We see the explosion that killed her father. We see her arguing with her mother. So the hallucination sequence is done really well, and it gives us some backstory on Katniss and paints a picture of how she's become the character that she is because she's had to, because her mum's just shut off from the world when her father died, and Katniss has had to take on the father role. And we see Peter, and we're not 100% sure if it's the real Peter or if it's a hallucinating Peter. And then she wakes up, and her stings on her hands are covered in like leaf bandages. And this is an echo. Rue says that she's had to change them twice when Katniss asks how long she's been unconscious. And this is an echo in later films because Prim will be shown to be training to be a healer and a medic, and there are connections with Prim and Rue that we'll explore more in the next couple of these sequences within the Supreme Ordeal. But basically, Katniss becomes allied to Rue, and they become friends. Rue gives her the information that the career tributes have piled up all their supplies together, and booby trapped all around them. They've dug up the booby traps and put them all around them. And Katniss says something like, "We should go blow them up." She also asks where Peter is, and she says he's down by the river somewhere, which will pay off in a couple of sequences. And they hatch up a plan to go and blow up the supplies. And that's the next sequence. And Katniss goes to blow up the supplies, and they arrange so Rue is going off to light various bonfires that they've set up with green wood on, so they'll smoke to draw the career tributes away. And then Katniss will go and do that. And then they sing melodies to the Mockingjays so they can use that as a signal to say everything's okay. This is an important point because, and notice they're different melodies. If you're a musician, you'll know Rue's melody is in a major tonality, but Katniss's is in a minor tonality, which kind of suits their personalities in many ways. But that 4-note melodic fragment that Katniss sings is another thing that will be echoed in later stories. And the lesson I guess from this to take away is if you're going to plan something that's going to be a series of 3 stories or 5 stories, or however many it is, you need to have a good idea of what's going to be important later down the line so that you can put it in to the first story so that it then has greater resonance when it reappears in future stories. So this is one of those things. Katniss goes to where the supplies are and she shoots there's a bag of apples she sees on the top, and they roll off and they set off the mines. And this is another echo to the scene earlier in the film where she's being interviewed by the games masters and she shoots the arrow from the pig's mouth when they're ignoring her, and then gives them the sardonic bow. So that, and if you notice as well, there's another echo of that sequence. So her first shot kind of skims the bag and doesn't do what she wants it to do, which was like the first shot in that sequence with the games masters. And then she takes a deep breath and steadies herself and fires a second arrow, which is perfect. And that happens here as well. So again, the believability of that action is set up by what happened earlier. Very, very subtle, very clever piece of writing. And one of the reasons why I advocate for you doing your own analysis of films and stuff, because you'll start to see things like this and it makes you understand story better, makes you a better writer. She goes back after the explosions to try and find Rue. She sings her motif, no answer, but the Mockingjays take it up, but then she hears Rue screaming. This is the scene I've given its own little screen to. It's the scene where Rue dies. So Katniss frees Rue from a net, and then Marvel attacks and throws a spear. Katniss avoids it and shoots Marvel, but the spear has missed Katniss and it's hit Rue in the chest. And we understand from Katniss's reaction that it's a mortal wound and there's not going to be much she can do about it. As Rue is dying, she asks Katniss to sing to her. And if you watch the film carefully, you'll note that the connection between Prim, or the echo of Prim and Rue, is paid off here because Katniss sings the same song to Rue as she's dying as she sang to comfort Prim in the very first sequence in the Hunger Games. So it's a really clever scene, and it's done very subtly, but it creates and you get the character understanding of why Katniss has been so protective of Rue, because she reminds her of Prim. They're similar heights as well. We've got the healing thing that I just talked about, really subtle thing, but it's what happens next that really makes this scene stand out. So Katniss covers her with flowers, puts a bouquet in Rue's fingers, and then as she leaves, she looks for a camera and she gives a District 12 salute for Rue in the direction of the camera. And then we cross cut immediately to District 11, and a man does the same thing, and then he suddenly, and we don't know, and it's never implied. We're never told if it's someone who's a family member of Rue or anything like that. But the man who does it then starts throwing things at the Capitol's troopers, and riots start, and we see those riots are ongoing. So this is a really important scene because we've got the Echo with the District 12 salute, and it's almost like this is an inciting incident for the rebellion that is then going to rumble on through the rest of the stories, and that this is the incident that really sparks it. So it's a really important scene. It's poignant, but it's got ramifications and repercussions that rumble forwards from the stories. So again, you can find this scene on YouTube. Go and watch it. It's very, very well shot, very well written, really well acted, and it's a really important scene for the stories that follow. You'll see when I do the analysis of, do the analysis for Catching Fire. There's a throwback or a callback to this scene when the tributes in Catching Fire have to go up before the Games Masters. So this, I think, is the moment when the rebellion starts taking shape. At the moment, it's just isolated riots and isolated troubles, but this is where it starts. So really important to watch the scene from the context of what happens and to what the ramifications of the events in this scene are going forwards. Okay, let's go over to the next sequence in the Supreme Ordeal. This is Peter. There's a Capitol make an announcement which is sparked by Haymitch talking to the Games Master. Obviously, he's heard the rumours about District 11 and the riots, and he says something like, change the rules, talks about star-crossed lovers, and have to make 2 tributes win, or something like that. Give people something to hope for, and at some stage I'll come back and talk about, there's a little small interaction between Snow and the Games Master that's really important here, where Snow says you need to give people a little bit of hope, but if you give them too much, it's dangerous. Something like that, but it's a really important minor sequence. So they make an announcement. Now two tributes from each district can be joint winners. So Katniss thinks of Peter, and she goes down to the riverside and try and find him. And she finds him, and he's camouflaged himself, but his leg is badly wounded. Now Haymitch sends some soup, and he says to her, "Can we have a proper kiss, please, for the cameras?" Remember, it is a reality show. It's not just an adventure. That there's wider purposes beyond what's going on, and by this stage, when we see the 2 scenes, we see where Haymitch is arguing or putting Katniss's case forward, trying to get help for her with sponsors. He's a very different character from the character we met on the train, from the slovenly drunk. He's now animated, he's agitated, he's persuasive, and we don't hear what he says, but we can see from his body language and how he's interacting with these people, he's playing the game and trying to get things for his tributes, because he now has hope. Anyway, we go on to the next sequence. I've called this Medicine and More. Each of the surviving tributes have something they need, and the Capitol make an announcement that they'll put it in a bag at the cornucopia at sunrise. And Katniss tells Peter that she won't go, but when Peter falls asleep, she does. She's attacked by Clove. We see Foxface first. I've not spoken much about Foxface because she has kind of a minor role, but something that she does do gives us a nod as to consequences, and we'll talk about that in the next video when we look at the resurrection sequence. But she's attacked here by Clove again, and Clove basically is too strong for her, too well trained. She's got her pinned down with a knife to her throat, and she's taunting Katniss about Rue. She's really drawing the moment out about when she's going to kill her. And Thresh, who is also from District 11, basically comes from behind her, pulls her off Katniss, and slams her against the side of the cornucopia so hard that she breaks her neck. And he says to Katniss that this one was for Rue. You won't get another one, something like that. And then he goes off. Katniss gets the medicine for Peter and rushes off to go and give the medicine to Peter so that his leg will get better. And then finally we get to the last sequence. This is the final conflict with Cato. And there's an important little moment that I haven't bullet pointed out just before this sequence starts. Peter and Katniss are hunting for food, foraging for things they can eat, and Peter has collected a load of berries, and there's a cannon which goes off, which means someone's died. Katniss thinks it's Peter, and she goes running, and she gets to where they were putting their stuff down, and the thing they were taking the food that they'd foraged back, and she sees loads of these berries. We don't know what they are, but Katniss is terrified of these berries. She finds Peter, and he's got a handful of these berries in his hands, and she shouts at him and says, "What are you doing?" And it turns out that the berries are called nightlock. And if I do a lesson on writing lessons from this film, I'll talk about naming conventions and how that's such a clever name and what it's drawn from. But she says, if you eat that, you'll be dead within a minute. And then they get back to where they were going to, where their supplies were, and Foxface has come in and eaten some of the berries, and she's dead on the floor. And Katniss takes some of the berries and says we could try and poison Cato. Anyway, what then happens is the engineered mutts apparate into the arena, and they chase. And also the engineers, you see the engineers basically turning the sun down, and it gets dark, so that the final confrontation is going to be in the dark. And Peter says, "What's happening?" And Katniss says, "It must be the finale." And the mutated dogs are chasing Katniss and Peter, and they run, and they end up on top of the cornucopia to shelter. But they find that Cato is there, and obviously there's a fight, and he ends up in a Mexican standoff. Cato's got his arm around Peter's neck. Cato's face is all bloodied and bruised, and there's been another cannon blast, and we've seen Thresh's image up on the roof of the dome. And when we see Cato with his face all blooded, the kind of implicit assumption is that Cato killed Thresh, but Thresh was quite a big guy, and they've had quite a struggle about it, and he's wounded. And they have this Mexican standoff, and they're talking, and Katniss then shoots Cato's hand, which Peter suggests, and he lets Peter go, and Peter shoves him off the roof of the cornucopia, and the mutated dogs are down on the floor, and we hear noises of them tearing him apart, but Katniss shoots him to kill him as a mercy, and that concludes the Supreme Ordeal. And so it's really unusual in a hero's journey style film to see the Supreme Ordeal last for this length of time, but it shows that the hero's journey isn't a blueprint, it's a set of guidelines, and each of the sequences build up to the finale and tell us different things about Katniss and about Peter, and also about the games as well. And there's little interactions and cuts to the games masters, cuts to Snow. They're all important, but I think this is the best way to think of the Supreme Ordeal and how the arena sequence is engineered in the Hunger Games, in the first movie anyway. So that's where we're going to end this video. In the next episode, we're going to continue the hero's journey analysis, and the next episode will be the last of these analysis of the first Hunger Games movie, and we're going to look at the final steps. And what's interesting here is traditionally it should be, so after Supreme Ordeal, it should be reward, then road back, then resurrection, then return with the elixir. But in the Hunger Games, the next scene is the resurrection, and then we get reward and road back and return with the elixir. So we'll look at how that's done in the next video. If you've got any questions or comments, just email me, paul@deliberate-practice.com. Don't forget to go and sign up for the email list there as well. And if you're an aspiring and or frustrated fiction writer, you can check out the resource I'm putting together. It's called the Writing Vault. You can see the URL there, and there'll be a link in the description. Go check that out. If you've got questions on it, you can use the email address that's on this screen. One of the things that I'm planning to do in about 2 weeks is in the vault put kind of written versions of these videos, but intersperse them with the clips that I'm talking about. So as you're reading the analysis in a more leisurely manner than perhaps watching them on YouTube, you can stop at a point and go, right, I'm going to look at this clip of Ruth's death and see these things that Paul talked about, and see if you can see them, and see how the filmmakers did them and dramatically showed them to us on the screen, and see for yourself rather than my descriptions of them triggering memories. So those will be going in the Writing Vault, but it will be a couple of weeks before I can get round to that. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one when we finish up the hero's journey analysis of the first Hunger Games film.